So I think we'll get started. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 50 Sussex Drive for this special event exploring the blue economy and the greening of marine industries. The Royal Canadian Geographical Society is delighted to be collaborating with the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Ottawa again today at Canada's Centre for Geography and Exploration, here on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe peoples, and I further acknowledge and recognize that the Society's work reaches across all the distinct First Nations, Métis homelands, and Inuit Nanangat, and for this we are most grateful. I'm John Geiger. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and also Canadian Geographic Enterprises. And given my position, I naturally have a great interest in Canada's and the world's marine environments, particularly as our country is home to the planet's longest coastline and as such holds a leadership position in global ocean conservation. Both the Society and Canadian Geographic have long supported and covered related issues. Notably, one of our honorary vice presidents is Dr. Joe McGuinness, the legendary underwater explorer and scientist, and the Society's inaugural explorer in residence, Jill Heinerth, is a renowned cave diver. And this past year, Canadian Geographic was proud to have collaborated with Canada's Ocean Supercluster on an amazing series of maps detailing elements of our country's ocean industries and a related series of blogs. Collaboration, of course, is a critical element of much of the Society's work, and we have likewise had a rich working relationship with the Royal Norwegian Embassy that reflects our country's long-standing diplomatic ties as pioneers in ocean exploration and science and as modern maritime policymakers. As I noted prior to yesterday's event with the Embassy on sustainability in the Arctic, we were honored to celebrate with Ambassador Fredriksson's predecessor the presentation of the first ever English translation of legendary Norwegian explorer Roald Amundson's expedition diaries to the speakers of the House of Commons and the Canadian Senate. So that took place here at 50 Sussex in 2017. The following year, in conjunction with the Embassy, we were privileged to host Lessons from the Arctic, an important exhibit honoring Amundson's accomplishments and linking those to his subsequent success in Antarctica by adapting many of the traditional lifeways of the Inuit. And that was a critical aspect of his success. I'd be remiss not to mention too our pleasure in having had Geir Clover, a great friend, fellow of the Society, and director of Norway's world-renowned Fram Museum, here on a number of occasions. Of course, the Fram Museum is home to two of the great exploration ships in history, the Fram and the Joa, and Geir has been here on a number of occasions, and we're always delighted to see him. All these collaborations, like today's and yesterday's, are fitting connections to our shared interests and priorities and to our ongoing relationship. So with all that said, I'm really honored to introduce His Excellency John Fredriksson, Norway's Ambassador to Canada. Your Excellency.
So, thank you, John, and a big thank you to the Royal Canadian Geographic Society for co-hosting and collaborating with the Embassy on this occasion today. As was just said, this is actually day two, if you like, of a series of events. Yesterday we talked about the Arctic and the collaboration between Norway and Canada, and today we're going to talk about blue economy, sustainable blue economy, and ocean policies from the Norwegian perspective, and we'll hear a lot from the Canadian perspective as well. So welcome to this half day of devoted to the future of a sustainable blue economy. Now, ocean policies, ocean politics seem to be in vogue, but I can assure you there is absolutely nothing novel about discussing sound management of the oceans, getting the balance right between harvesting and protecting the ecosystems of their most important source of food is something every community along the Norwegian coast has had to deal with for thousands of years. And Canada, being the continent of three oceans, will know what we are talking about when it comes to managing oceans. We know, of course, that a lot of Canadians live nowhere near the ocean. Still, the blue economy in the future will impact all our lives, I think, no matter where we live. And Norway tries to engage in maritime politics and marine policies around the world, globally. All in the range from, let's say, development of new technology and new industries, over to how can we manage sustainably the oceans, and how can we protect where that is needed. And to do that, we also need some kind of promotional, visible initiatives. So as we are speaking here today, we'll have a Norwegian tall ship, Christian Radich, sailing 55,000 nautical miles around the world. Our Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, has promised to be ambassador for that sailing. So it's already underway, and it will sail around the globe and be, let's say, a visible sign of our engagement with ocean policies. Former Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg took the initiative to bring together a group of heads of state to form a high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. And the idea was to overcome the potential conflict between protecting and living off the ocean in a world engulfed in climate change. Rapid climate change, we should add. And to join the group of leaders, among them Prime Minister Trudeau very prominently, they would also have to commit to present to the group their own management plan for their exclusive economic zones. And that is a deliverance that is due very soon for the members of the high-level panel. There was also a body of scientists appointed, and they delivered a recommendation to the UN Ocean Summit, which was supposed to take place in Lisbon in 2020. It didn't, but the recommendations were still delivered and very much modeled on the type of work that had been done by the UN Climate Panel. And at COP26 in Glasgow recently, Prime Minister Støre formally took over from his predecessor in being co-chair of the high-level panel. And I can assure there's a very strong will from our new government in Norway to continue leadership on the ocean agenda and to ensure that we will protect but also develop new and sustainable ocean-based industries. Personally, I had the interesting task back in 2007 to be a part of the startup for this initiative, and also trying to convince some of our colleagues at the UN that this was actually a good idea. So, I mean, what was the idea? What was the point of doing this? And I think, again, very much what made sense at that time was we had a very good body of work being done on the climate change portfolio. We had understood that to address climate change, we will need scientific guidance, we will need standards, we will need benchmarks. And that's basically what we were thinking, that we should bring the same kind of benchmark and standards and policies and scientific basis into the ocean agenda, not only nationally, but globally as well. But you do not want to take any of this from me, so you will hear it from others. So first we will have a greeting from our Minister of Oceans, Norwegian Minister of Ocean, Bjørnar Skjæran. And then our distinguished speakers will take us through a broad set of topics related to the ocean economy. To guide us through it all, we have our wonderful moderator, Alana Mitchell, journalist, author in her own right, writing about the challenges posed to all of us when it comes to taking care of our oceans in the future. So with that, let's get started. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to talk about sustainable blue economy at your seminar. Canada, Norway, and the entire world are facing a tremendous task. We need to find solutions to combat climate change and at the same time ensure healthy food, clean energy, clean transport, and decent jobs for our growing population. In short, we need to change the way we live our lives to build a sustainable future. In this picture, the ocean plays an important role. The potential is as vast as the ocean itself. According to the OECD, the ocean industries are expected to create 40 million jobs and double their contribution to the global economy by 2030. Today, Norway is a leading ocean nation. Our coastline is one of the longest in the world, and the marine areas we manage are more than 5 times as large as our land area. Every day, hundreds of thousands of Norwegians go to work in the ocean industries, which together account for about 70% of Norway's export earnings. As Norway's Minister of Fisheries and Maritime Policy, it is my duty to ensure a healthy marine environment. Norway's historical experience gives us an edge as the sea becomes more and more important. But it also places a heavy responsibility on our shoulders. Therefore, we must continue to invest in the marine and maritime industries and encourage research, innovation, and technological development in new areas. Moving forward, we will continue to work to meet the world's nutritional needs. We will continue to harvest the ocean's riches, but we must also ensure that future generations can do the same. And we will continue to develop the agricultural industry. However, we must listen carefully to scientific advice and implement this knowledge in practice. It is important that the authorities, research institutions, and the seafood industry cooperate together. We must do what we already do well, even better, and at the same time pave the way for new developments in aquaculture. Dear all, the ocean holds a great potential for sustainable growth. Thanks to Norway's own background as a leading ocean nation, we know that protection and production can go hand in hand. And through responsible management and innovative business development, we will manage to reach the global sustainability goals. In other words, the path to a green future is blue. With these words, I wish you an interesting seminar and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Hi, thank you everybody for being here today. It's great to see people live. And I'm also wanting to welcome our virtual guests who are joining us from all sorts of different parts of the world, I'm sure. A very warm welcome to all of you. Bonjour à tous. Moi, je m'appelle Alana Mitchell. Je suis journaliste canadienne. So my name is Alana Mitchell. I'm a Canadian journalist, an author, and a playwright. And I've spent a great deal of time thinking about the ocean and a lot of time being on research vessels with scientists as they explore what's going on with the ocean. And that led to a book that I wrote more than a decade ago called Seasick, The Global Ocean in Crisis. And eventually, with the help of some theater artists, I turned that into a one-woman play that I perform all over the world. The play's the same name as the book, Seasick. And I just got back from Glasgow, where I performed it in conjunction with the climate summit there. And so I'm particularly excited to hear what this incredible roster of guests has to say this morning about what's going on in the ocean. So we'll be hearing, as you know, about the blue economy, as we just heard. We'll be hearing about protecting the ocean. We're going to be hearing about making sure we can still get resources from the marine world. And we'll be hearing an enormous amount this morning about fish. Our event will end, we think, around just shortly before 1 o'clock with a roundtable discussion among some of our guests. And so I want to introduce our first guest, who's going to set the stage for us. What does a sustainable ocean economy look like? Sturla Henriksson is a special advisor on the ocean to the UN Global Compact. The Compact is how the UN cooperates with the international business community, and it's the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative with more than 18,000 members across business and civil society. Mr. Henriksson is joining us virtually. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Alana. Bonjour. A very good morning to all of you. And thanks for the invitation to speak here. And apologize for not being able to be there in person. You mentioned, Alana, Glasgow, and let me start by offering some takeaways from COP26. I think that from a political perspective, it's fair to say that the conference achieved more than could be feared in advance, but less than could be hoped for. From a nature, climate perspective, I think it's a more sobering outcome. I think it's important that we remember that 1.5 degree it's not a political number. It's not a political ambition or compromise. It's basically a non-negotiable planetary boundary. If we move beyond that, we will be risking passing nature's tipping points, and then we are on a journey where we do not know where this can end. And just to put that into perspective, scientific models indicate that with a 1.5 degree target, the atmosphere can absorb something like 400 gigatons more of CO2 equivalents. And now we are at a pace of more than 40 gigatons a year. So that gives us less than 10 years before we will be passing this tipping points. And I think it's sort of an indication of the fact that we are now sort of on the verge of transitioning from a crisis to a catastrophe that the president of COP26, Alok Sharma, he broke into tears in his concluding remarks. I think that made an impression on all of us present there. This was also, and that is on the positive side, this was the first COP where ocean was a formal part of the conference. It's now squarely on the agenda, as John Kerry has repeatedly stated. Climate is ocean, ocean is climate. You cannot resolve the one without the other. And going forward, this will be then a formal part of COP. Now. And that is, of course, very encouraging to those of us who have been working for many years now for this to happen. And I'm very proud that the Ocean Stewardship Coalition of the UN Global Compact has seconded the high-level champion for ocean under the UNFCCC. So just briefly about this coalition, we are 300 plus members from the business community, all parts of the ocean industries, but also supply industries, the entire value chain, equipment suppliers, cargo owners, finance and insurance. We have governments. Norway is supporting us in this, and that we're very happy with, of course. We have leading scientific communities. We have the most relevant UN specialized agencies. So this is a coalition which is really gaining momentum, and which is now, of course, have a focus which goes beyond SDG 14, which is life below water. This is about what the ambassador alluded to in his intervention. This is about ocean management, because we need healthy and productive oceans, and at the same time to develop the ocean industries. So this is ocean management in the sense of ocean protection and ocean production going hand in hand. And we have identified 5 what we call tipping points and focus areas for our own work. It is about sustainable seafood. It's decarbonizing shipping. It's about producing electricity from the ocean. It's about preventing ocean littering and pollution. And it's about contributing to ocean data and science. So just to give a flair of some of the projects that we are running here, we have with the aquaculture, we are cooperating both with individual companies and with Seabass. We have a large initiative on seaweed, on decarbonizing shipping. We have, of course, the technical and operational parts of it, but also we have just launched a project which is called Just an Equitable Transition, because this is as much a people transition as it is a green transition. We have, during COP, we launched what we call climate smart marine spatial planning for the offshore wind farm industry. And this will also be expanded to other industries like solar, ports, and so forth. We are running a project for IMO called Global Litter. And also we are cooperating closely with UNESCO IOC on the ocean, on the decade of ocean science. Also, we have a very close cooperation with insurance companies and the financial sectors and developing concepts for blue finance, which will be then related to sustainability. Also, in conclusion, we are also, and that is, I'm very happy with that, that we are closely cooperating with the high-level panel on ocean, where both Canada and Norway are prominent members. So I think that this climate, nature, ocean, people nexus will be gaining momentum and focus and prominence going forward. So I would invite all of you, if you are interested, to reach out to me or my colleagues to join this coalition. And hope to see you soon, be it in COP next year or the UN Ocean Conference in Portugal next summer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was just fascinating to hear about all those advances in the Ocean Council and the coalition. Our next speaker is Kendra McDonald, and she is going to, she's giving our keynote address this morning. She is the Chief Executive of Canada's Ocean Supercluster, which was set up by the Canadian government to find sustainable and commercial solutions to some of the biggest challenges in the ocean. That means kickstarting innovation and collaboration, and then bringing those new inventions to market. Please welcome her to the podium.
Largely unexplored and not well understood, our ocean is a powerful, resilient, and mighty resource. On the front line in the fight against climate change, outpacing the growth of the broader economy, creating new companies and jobs, and accelerating growth that is digital, sustainable, and inclusive. Helping communities, both coastal and inland, and all Canadians to build a strong, self-sustaining future. Canada is leading the way as an ocean nation. In a world where there is growing demand for sustainable protein, our ocean helps feed the planet. Where 90% of shipping is marine, our ocean moves the goods we need. As we consider how to power the world, our ocean will help make the transition to green energy possible. And as the environment is pushed to absorb increasing amounts of carbon, our ocean is home to the largest carbon sink. There is a race against time to solve significant ocean challenges, and it's Canadian innovators who are delivering solutions for a better world and a brighter future. This is Canada's time to lead. Indigenous culture tells us that ocean is life, where every second breath we take is from the ocean, sustaining us and providing for us, worthy of respect and consideration, and with an eagle's view for generations to come. Bringing Indigenous knowledge and Western science together, building capabilities, partnerships, and opportunity. Canada's Ocean Supercluster is a pan-Canadian, industry-led network that is changing the way ocean business is done. With hundreds of members from coast to coast to coast, the Ocean Supercluster is built on collaboration across different sectors and regions, delivering transformational projects that not only tackle big challenges, but also create big opportunity. Startups, scale-ups, and established companies are working together with the research community, government, incubators, and regional hubs and investors. Together, they are developing hundreds of new made-in-Canada ocean products, processes, and services that help us access better data, going deeper and further to explore our ocean, monitor movement and health of fish and other species in our waters, transition to greener fuels and electrification of vessels, develop our vast bioresources and sustainable protein alternatives, support increasingly digital defense activity with the newest ocean technologies, and stay connected to offshore industry from anywhere and reduce risk to workers through remote operations. The Ocean Supercluster is building an innovation ecosystem that is robust and diverse to help us fully realize the benefits of Canada's ocean opportunity, delivering mentorship, skills development, networking, and internships to increase the participation of Indigenous peoples, women, youth, and underrepresented groups in ocean, and making this the best place to start and grow an ocean company. The development of Canada's blue economy is one of the most important opportunities of our time for a better world and a brighter future. As an ocean nation, this is our time.
Do I now have control? I don't feel like I have control. Can I get back to the slide deck? While they're figuring that out, it's been a long time since I stood at a podium. It's a bit intimidating. I'm used to talking to my computer in a room. Good morning, everyone. It's absolutely a pleasure to be able to be here with you in person, and for many of you that are joining us virtually to talk about certainly one of my favorite topics these days, which is the sustainable development of the blue economy. And we've heard several times already how critical that is to our future. As one of our As the supercluster has almost 450 members now from coast to coast to coast, the Arctic, the Pacific, and the Atlantic. And we are really working together to try to build and grow our ocean economy in a sustainable, digital, and inclusive way. We are one of 5 superclusters in Canada. We are part of the Innovation Supercluster Initiative, for those of you that may not be familiar with that. And it was really established in 2018 to change the way that Canada invests in innovation. One of our Indigenous participants recently said, "This is an important responsibility that we are just waking up to." And Canada is working really hard to build solutions to be able to address both ocean health and productivity. So recently, and I think I saw Dr. Anya Waite in the room. There she is, over there somewhere. So Dr. Anya Waite is the CEO of the Ocean Frontier Institute, and she sits on our board of directors for the supercluster. And she was recently at COP26. We've heard it referenced a couple of times, really trying to elevate the understanding of the key role that the ocean plays in climate and the need for it to be part of the net zero conversation. And so, you know, the ocean absorbs more carbon than the rainforest, which certainly was news to me in terms of, and I think to many around the world. And we have the most intense carbon sink in the ocean in the North Atlantic. Usually I point just outside the window, but we're in Ottawa, so many kilometers to the east. And that is really important because as countries are setting their net zero targets, they are assuming that the ocean will be able to continue absorbing carbon at current rates in many cases. And what we're actually seeing, and Dr. Waite can certainly speak to the science much better than I can, but what we're actually seeing is that is changing, and we actually don't have, we are not currently monitoring sufficiently to understand the extent and speed of that change and what that will actually mean for all of our net zero calculations, which is, you know, is a bit of a scary thing. And so the conversation at COP26 was really around how do we work together as nations? This is not a problem that a single nation will be able to solve. So how do we work together as nations like we work in space in terms of monitoring stations to be able to set up, you know, an ocean observatory, maybe more than one, possibly starting with the North Atlantic, building on our technologies to be able to monitor this and feed into the ongoing net zero conversation. So we know that, and we've heard it already several times in the conversation this morning, our oceans are under pressure, and we cannot afford, in a world where the ocean economy is set to double by 2030, which is $1.5 trillion in growth, we cannot afford to do things the way we've always been doing them, because already our ocean is under tremendous pressure, whether it's ocean acidification or sea level rise. You know, temperatures rising, the reduction in biodiversity, the pollution. We heard the areas of focus earlier. We cannot do things the same way. We have to be building solutions that consider both the health and wealth of the ocean, and the high-level panel on sustainability, which was referred to, has, you know, indicated that a healthier ocean is also a more productive ocean. So our economic targets and our ocean protection targets do align in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And maybe nowhere is that certainly more felt in Canada than in the Arctic. I know there was a separate Arctic conversation yesterday. I had the opportunity to be briefly in the Arctic and just to see the speed of change there with the melt and what that means really drives home the importance of this conversation. As we've heard, the ocean moves our goods. The ocean is a sustainable source of protein in a population that is continuing to grow. And the ocean plays a key role in absorbing emissions. And the ocean conversation matters to everyone, despite the fact that we have a large percentage of our, certainly Canadian population, that is not on our coast. And one of the things that we're trying to do with the supercluster is really raise the awareness of that conversation and the importance to all of us, because 40% of our population in the world is within 100 kilometers of our coasts. But there is certainly a large percentage that lives inland as well. Our Minister of Innovation and Industry recently said, we can turn our green ambition into economic opportunity. I'm excited to spend a couple of minutes on this. So this is the Blue Technology Barometer. It was just released on Monday, so this is my first opportunity to talk about it. And so this was from MIT, really looking at where we are. They looked at 66 countries that had sort of coastal, focused on coast, and they focused on policy, marine activity, climate change, and ocean innovation, and did a ranking. And so we were pretty excited. So I will say first, Norway was 6th. They were in the top 10. And the UK was the leader in terms of their investment and their innovation ecosystem. But Canada also did rank in the top 10, which was incredibly exciting for us. We were just behind South Korea and just ahead of Japan. But I think it's a testament to the investments that we're making and the types of projects that we are starting to see. And one of the key places where we did rank high was actually in policy and regulation. So I think this does really reaffirm the investments in the supercluster program and what we're doing as a supercluster, combined with some of the other big activities that we have, like the Ocean Frontier Institute and the Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship, and a whole long list of different activities. But this sort of demonstrates that are we getting some of our policy decisions around ocean investment correct. So in March of 2020, when the ocean economy was significantly impacted, started to be significantly impacted by the pandemic, we launched a program that was really focused on smaller projects and in the space of digital solutions, remote operations, and environmental technologies. We were making a guess at what would be relevant in a post-pandemic world back in April of 2020. But we really, with that, saw an increase in momentum. One of our members said we were, many were pulling on the handbrake and we were just pushing on the gas to try to help our companies be able to continue to retain staff, to continue to be able to invest in innovation. And that took our portfolio sort of in 6 months from 6 projects to 40 plus projects. There was a lot of activity in a really short period of time, but that was really exciting for us. And a lot of those projects are now sort of 6, 9, 12 months in and starting to see some of those objectives come to fruition. On the weekend, this is what I did on my Saturday afternoon, last weekend in Halifax, had the opportunity to be on a panel at the Halifax International Security Forum talking about the role of ocean and climate change with some very intimidating panelists from all around the world in the military. So head of the US Coast Guard, head of the Jamaican military forces, and on the other side of me is a gentleman from the Netherlands who was also in uniform. But just, they are, yes, they are responding to, as we're seeing in British Columbia, it has a huge impact on forces all around the world because they are coming and needing to deal with, responses to natural disasters, and what does that mean for them, and what does that mean for the world. So this is a global conversation. And I think every conversation reinforces that what one country does, all the oceans are interconnected, affects everyone. And so these conversations, like we're having today, in terms of cooperation, finding opportunities to work together, is incredibly important. And from a Canadian perspective, now that we have a portfolio of projects, and we'll talk about a few of them, that makes it easier because we can find areas of common interest and we can find areas of common investment, and we are increasingly doing so. So this is our most recent partnership. This is with the plant. And so the plant is an innovation hub outside of New York, and they are focused on climate change solutions. And so where their overall climate change objectives align with our blue climate change objectives, green and blue coming together, we see some real opportunities to be able to work together to create opportunities for our companies. This was just announced a couple of weeks ago. And also they have a big focus on inclusion and inclusive workforce. And so we see opportunities to be able to work there together as well. So I wanted to spend, I don't expect you to be able to read that, that's just a lot of color, and a lot of names. But this will give you a bit of a sense of some of our projects. You heard them a bit in the video as well. So we have 2 main types of projects. One is our technology leadership projects, and those are really focused on commercializing technology. You can find all of these on our website, by the way, as well. And so they're focused on commercializing technology. That is the bulk of our investments. And our technologies are really focused, as I talked about, on digital solutions, and increasingly on solutions with some kind of emissions reduction or specific sort of ocean health target in addition to their commercial outcome. And then we have a series of projects that is focused on our broader ecosystem. So our role as a supercluster is to build the ecosystem. And so we look at the bulk of those projects are focused on building an inclusive workforce. We have now over 60 projects and over $300 million in project value that is currently under contracting, and about 2/3 of those are contracted and announced. We see lots of activity in the autonomous uncrewed vessel space and really focused on data collection. And so this is Exocean. Exocean is an Irish company, has operations in Canada, and their project is to get this vessel further and deeper into the water and to significantly reduce the cost of being able to collect data versus a much more traditional research vessel. Kraken, which is our Ocean Vision project, similar objectives around data collection and looking at robotics as a service, and they are working. So one of the things that we have in several of our projects is cross-sectoral collaboration. So the Ocean Supercluster, those 400 plus members are across shipping and aquaculture and fisheries and defense and ocean technology and bioresources. So we're very broad in terms of what we cover. And so they are working with fisheries and offshore oil and gas in terms of data collection. And then Teledyne Caris, they are in the surveying space. We have world-class surveying capability in New Brunswick, and they are actually extending their solutions around data collection and providing world-class data for decision-making. This is our recently announced project. So this is Rope on Command. So Assured is a startup. So we actually have over 80% of our projects are run by small and medium enterprises, and a number of those are quite small. And so they are really bringing solutions to larger organizations, which is incredibly exciting for us. And so this project is specifically targeted at fishing systems and software to reduce entanglements of species, and in particular with a focus on the right whale. And so again, you see that theme of commercial solution, but bringing that to an ocean health problem. InnovaSea, so this is our Ocean Aware project. It is our largest project. It's almost $30 million. I think it's $29 million. And it is one of our largest collaborations as well with fishing, aquaculture, energy, startup companies, Department of Fisheries, 2 institutions, both in Newfoundland and in Nova Scotia, all working together to be able to do fish tracking to improve monitoring. So monitoring of fish health and fish movement, more predictive decision making, and they continue to be able to build on that collaboration. They're one of our earlier projects as well. This is Grieg, so certainly Norwegian company with significant Canadian operations. They have a project in Marystown, and what they are trying to develop is real-time analytics in aquaculture. And so they are partnered with a subsea imaging company, a local subsea imaging company, and a fish tracking company. And they are looking at getting more precise information around environmental conditions and more precise information around individual fish to be able to improve decision making. And hopefully that is one of our bigger projects as well. If that is successful, that is something they will be able to replicate globally, which is incredibly exciting. Talibot, so this is out on the West Coast. This is a test of my memory of what all our projects do. And so Talibot is actually an artificial intelligence solutions, and what they are actually doing is being able to increase yield with some of their predictive capability in fish processing and to be able to provide better transparency around decision making. So marine transportation, we heard one of the themes of the previous speaker around decarbonization. And so that is a huge, increasing area of focus that we're seeing. So the supercluster, again, we're industry led. And so we invest where industry is investing. And so increasingly what we are seeing is industry investment in solutions that are reducing emissions in marine transportation. And this was actually, you may have noticed in Canada's overall rankings, one of the other areas that we scored very high, we were third, was in ocean conservation or whatever that category, ocean solutions. And one of the reasons was because we got recognition for some of these investments in solutions to reduce emissions. So a couple of these, so this is GIT. This is graphene nanotechnology that has developed a smart coating for external hulls that reduces leaching and reduces drag to be able to lead to emission reduction. They recently did some work with Transport Canada. They were able to demonstrate 20% reduction on small vessels, which is significant. And now they are testing with us as a supercluster project on larger vessels. So we're very excited to see the outcome of that. This is Catal, our project Orca. So this was our first Alberta-led project. So when I got involved with the supercluster, I wasn't expecting a lot of Alberta-led ocean projects. But they have a real focus on alternative fuels, and we're seeing more projects in that space and a recognition that marine transportation is a significant contributor to emissions from an overall transportation perspective. And so they have increased the water content, I believe also leveraging nanotechnology, into diesel, reducing the diesel content, and it can be used without retrofitting of vessels, so it can be used now as a transitionary fuel to be able to reduce emissions, and so they are starting to see some positive outcomes of their testing. And finally, I was reminded last night, Corvus, another company tied to Norway, and they are doing some work, and I'll play a quick video from them in the battery space to be able to extend sort of bigger batteries, larger life. So I'll just play that for you, maybe. There we go.
Here at Corvus, we manufacture energy storage system technology. So the Corvus technology functions a little bit like the battery system in a hybrid vehicle or in an all-electric vehicle. Our newest product is called Blue Whale. It is revolutionary in a few ways. It is a large format battery system which is physically scalable. This lets us set industry-leading energy density levels, gravimetric and volumetric densities. Blue Whale represents an architectural innovation in what marine energy storage systems are, and it also lets us conceive of systems well above 50 megawatt hours. We can fit the Blue Whale product into a range of different room shapes and sizes. And this makes it inherently flexible for vessels which are already sailing and vessels designed for ESS support. The Blue Whale product will be manufactured exclusively here in Richmond, BC. Corvus has gone to considerable expense with the very welcome support of Ocean Supercluster to manufacture an assembly line for the Blue Whale product. There is huge market demand for Blue Whale. The use of a robotic production line allows us to keep up with that demand and scale up from there using multiple shifts. As part of the verification process to prove the design and to create a meaningful demonstration of what Blue Whale is capable of, Corvus will be installing the very first operational system for Blue Whale on board the Seaspan Reliant. The support and partnership from Ocean Supercluster has been fundamental to enabling this opportunity, and we're very excited to see this first operational vessel in service. Corvus's mission is to power a clean future, and that means harnessing all of our technologies towards solving the Earth's problems, towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and towards building a cleaner future for all of us.
So, as I mentioned, the other key focus for us is on our ecosystem, and so the first problem we were trying to solve is the fact that we were light on startups, and so we were inspired by Catapult in Norway in terms of a focus on startups, and so if we were really going to build a broader, more robust ocean economy, we needed to work on this problem. And so our incubators from across Atlantic Canada came together to really develop some programming specific to startups. One of those is our Ocean Challenge. We just ran the second round of that, which is startups coming with solutions to problems of industry. And we just awarded 40 prizes in that space, from small prizes right up to a moonshot prize of $200,000 to help them build out their idea. We need an inclusive workforce to be able to tackle these challenges. We have very traditional workforces across the ocean economy. And so how do we really work together and attract new thinking and broader ideas? And so Ocean Allies has been focused on this. They came out with a report back in November around barriers to entry for underrepresented groups and women and Indigenous specifically. And so now we're working to be able to address those barriers and to try to broaden out that conversation across Canada. Students on Ice, or our Blue Futures Pathways project, is focused on connecting youth to opportunities in ocean. And so one of the challenges, there's a lack of awareness. There's sort of a knowledge of traditional jobs in ocean, and now it's so much broader. So how do we get our best thinkers into the ocean economy? How do we help them understand that they're part of the fight on climate change in ocean industries? And so that's what this group is trying to do. And finally, our Indigenous Career Pivot Pilot, and so I'll just play a quick video here and then I will wrap up. I saw the time signal. And so we have an Indigenous working group, and what they identified as their biggest challenge was actually mid-career. So how do I, mid-career, pivot into a career in ocean where I don't necessarily have the skill sets and the CV that would match that opportunity? And so we did a matching program. And so this young woman who's about to speak is one of the recipients, or one of the workers who was involved in that program.
Through Canada's Ocean Supercluster and through the Indigenous Career Pivot Program, that opened the doorway for me to find my place and my belonging in this territory. It's about taking care of the water, the bay, which gives us life. And that is a major responsibility to wake up to in 2021. And when we see what's happening with the oceans, with our waters, with our animals and plants that live there, when we take care of the water and the oceans and all of that life, they take care of us. And I give thanks, every day I wake up for this opportunity and for the ability to learn and grow within this sector. I think is very important as we move forward, that we understand, first and foremost, the treaties that we're operating on, and really build solid, sustainable relationships with Indigenous peoples, urban and non-urban Indigenous peoples, for their economic development and growth, as being the original stewards of the land, of the waters and all of that. And that goes beyond the Indigenous world, because we are all connected and we are all related. And I'm really grateful to the Indigenous Career Pivot Program for allowing me this opportunity and to learn and grow within the ocean economy with such an amazing team. It's been a month, but I have learned a lot. And I'm finding that it is so refreshing. I can be my authentic self in this space, and with such creatives and visionaries, and met with, kindness, honesty, sharing, and strength. And I say, Chimi Gwich, and thank you very, very much for this opportunity. Aho, on my relations.
So with that, I played her video, and I think she tells the story better than I do. But I think that just really reinforces what we're here to talk about today, that we need to work together. We need to work together as a nation. We need to work together internationally to be able to develop the solutions that we need for both the future health and productivity of our ocean. We heard prosperity and production are intertwined. We cannot continue to grow our ocean economy the way that we have. We've been tied to it in the past. The ocean is tied to our future. But now is the time to have the right conversations to make sure that we are all on this path to a sustainable blue economy over the next number of years. So thank you all so much. If you are looking for any more information on us, there's lots of links there, and happy to share them with you. And we hope that you follow our story, and I look forward to further conversation. And I was within my time. There you go. Excellent.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. And just a word to our guests in the room that we will have an opportunity a little later in the program during the discussion to ask questions of Kendra. So if you have some, start compiling them now. We're moving into the fish section of our program today, and our first speaker is Jon Arne Grøting, who is the Director of Aquaculture at the Norwegian Seafood Federation, and that federation represents companies in Norway's seafood sector. He is joining us virtually. Please welcome him.
Thank you for the possibility to talk to you in Canada about my and the Norwegian Seafood Federation's thoughts about the future for the Norwegian aquaculture industry. It's a big topic, but I hope that with this short presentation I can give a brief overview of what trends we see related to the development of our industry. But I will start to just give a short introduction of the organization I represent, Sjømat Norge, or in English, the Norwegian Seafood Federation. Sjømat Norge is the major seafood organization in Norway and is a part of the NHO, which is the Confederation of the Norwegian Enterprise, which is the main representative organization for Norwegian employers, with company ranging from small family-owned businesses to multinational companies. Sjømat Norge organized the whole seafood sector except the fishing industry. We have 800 member companies, which employs about 16,000 persons. For the aquaculture sector, the organization covers the whole value chain. We have several offices along the coast of Norway, and personally I sit in the middle of Norway in a town called Trondheim. The history of the Norwegian aquaculture started in the 60s with land-based farming of rainbow trout. But it really took off at the beginning of the 70s when we started with simple cages in the sea. In the beginning the major species was rainbow trout, but within a short time salmon took the leading position. Since the 70s we have seen a gradual increase in the production, with two exceptions. In the 90s it was a major financial problem because of too high production and large volume of fish in cold storage. And around 2012 we also saw a drop in prices because of the challenges with the salmon lice. But in total it is a fantastic story, and in 2020 we harvested 1.5 million tons with salmon and trout. And this is equivalent to 70 million meals every day. So if the Norwegian had to eat all of the fish themselves, we had to eat 3 meals of salmon each day. Luckily, 95% of all the fish we produce are exported. And we are very optimistic about the future. With a growing world population, there is an increased need for food, and we and the UN think that more of this food have to be produced in the sea. According to the UN, the aquaculture production has to double from the level in 2009 to 2030. This of course represents a great potential for the world aquaculture producers. And Norway have great ambitions. The potential for Norway is to increase the value creation with 5 times, from 100 billion Norwegian krone to 500 billion NOK in 2050. And 500 billion NOK is equivalent to 72 million Canadian dollar. With a decrease in the petrol and the gas sector, we believe that the seafood sector has the potential to become the most important industry in Norway. Aquaculture of salmon and trout will play an important role in this development, but also other sectors will be important, as the fisheries. You see the aquaculture of salmon and trout, you have the marine ingredients, you have the suppliers industry including the feed production, you have the production of marine algae and other highly productive waters. So this was the ambitions. What are the obstacles? And of course there are obstacles. In total, I would say that aquaculture is an environmental and a climate friendly way to produce protein. But there is challenges and there will be challenges. And the future development assumes that environmental impact will be reduced. The main challenges for the Norwegian aquaculture are the impact on wild salmon and discharge. The industry will take an active role to reduce this impact by strategies within the industry and the authorities. We also see an increased focus on animal welfare. The mortality is on level with the agriculture sector, but with an increased focus on biosecurity, optimizing the rearing condition, and development of vaccines for virus. I expect also to see an improvement related to the fish health and the animal welfare. The two main limited resources for the expected development in the industry are access to sea area and the need for new feed ingredients. And I will say a bit more about these two factors. Today, the cages with the mooring system use an area equivalent to the island Andøya, which you see here on another part of Norway, this red area. Even if a small area is used, we see it becomes more and more challenging to find new places to produce the fish. I think we still can optimize the production on the exciting sites, but we also need to find new areas for new sites. Part of the solution is make use of new technology in addition to the cage farming systems. Traditional cages is and will be in the near future the backbone of the Norwegian production. This is the most effective way and the environmental friendly way to produce salmon. We see in addition there will be use of semi-closed cages in sheltered area, included in so-called threshold fjords. Exposed aquaculture plants will make it possible to go offshore, and we will also see some land-based farms, but I think there will be few which have the whole production cycle within these farms. For several of the companies, they see a production combining these technologies to run the first production phase on the semi-closed farms in sea or on land, and then move the fish to cage farm or exposed plants. Several ongoing projects will give us more knowledge about this the next years. There is also a great focus on develop new feed ingredients. Most of these resources are not suitable for direct human consumption, but will be a necessary resource to be able to increase the feed production for the aquaculture sector. We also see that these new resources will contribute to make salmon aquaculture even more climate friendly. The feed ingredients represent a huge potential for added creation and employment for Norway. So we see the aquaculture sector in general, and specifically the Norwegian seafood industry, an important contributor to achieve the UN Sustainable Goal. The Norwegian seafood industry see that they contribute positively on 11 of the 70 goals. And for the future, we have a very ambitious vision. The Norwegian seafood industry will be a global leading producer of healthy food. We will deliver seafood, marine ingredients, world-class production expertise and technology. Through sustainable production methods and innovation, the Norwegian seafood industry constitutes Norwegian's most important contribution to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And with this vision, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker will tell us all about the Canadian aquaculture industry. He is Timothy Kennedy, and he is President and Chief Executive of the Canadian Aquaculture Industry Alliance, which represents Canada's seafood farming sector. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thanks, Elena, and special thanks to Ambassador Fredrickson and Canadian Geographic for hosting this event. I think it's obviously very timely, and it's especially good to be here in person with all of you and also those online. So very happy to be here. So the title I chose today, very simple, but it does have, of course, a double entendre, and that is Growing Canada's Blue Economy. And we've heard about how economic growth from our blue economy is very much a huge opportunity for Canada. But of course, in aquaculture, we are the only sector within the blue economy that physically grows to build that economy. And so grows from seed or from egg to plate. And that's really the responsibility of our sector in Canada. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing to make this happen. So these 4 numbers, many of you will be familiar with them, but I think they're really important to just lay out and focus on. The ocean is covered largely by water, mainly salt water. At present, only 3% of human food comes from the ocean. We know from the FAO's projections, the Food and Agriculture Organization's projections, that about 7 to 10% increase in demand for seafood per year is happening right now. And of course, by 2050, the estimate is that we'll have about 10 billion people in the world. So how do we feed this number of people in the world sustainably? And that's, I think, the challenge and the opportunity for the aquaculture sector in Canada, but around the world, as you heard from Jon Arne as well. Jon Arne mentioned this, but it's just a different graph. Again, some of you will have seen from the FAO. Really, the tradition of seafood development and production is, of course, wild capture. And what we're looking at going forward is that really the seas are maximally fished. There's some opportunity for change and development, but really we're seeing a maximization. And then going forward, that demand will be filled or met by aquaculture production. So very important, and certainly we will overtake right now. Actually, we're approaching about 60% of all seafood produced in the world is from aquaculture. From a carbon perspective, which is such a critical driver, Canada is a signatory, and in fact, just 2.5 years ago, I was here with J.G. Forgeron and many in this room to talk about the Sustainable Ocean, high-level panel for Sustainable Oceans Economy, led by Norway and partnered with Canada. One of the important reports that came out from the panel around ocean food said this: the largest potential carbon reduction gains for food production lie in the sustainable expansion of specifically marine aquaculture, right? That opportunity around our oceans. And what we see there is, again, that opportunity is an innovation opportunity, it's a people opportunity, and will really meet our future demands. Oftentimes we will hear, that there are, especially in Canada, there's obviously some controversy around Atlantic salmon. I'll talk more about that, but from a climate perspective, the profile of salmon from a carbon perspective is actually very, very low. It's very positive. So when you compare it to other species, animal protein species, it does very well from a carbon perspective, and it's very important to recognize that. We often wonder, what are Canadians eating? What actually makes up the seafood diet? In Canada, Canadians are very low consumers of seafood. It's only about 1.8% of the total diet is seafood. But when you actually look at consumption of seafood, salmon really is king and queen. From 2019, our information from Ipsos says that about 33% of choices of seafood choices is salmon. Shrimp comes in at 24%, and when you look at all other seafood choices for Canadians, they're single digits. So salmon consumption, and many here would recognize that, is a go-to seafood species. So critical for Canadian production, but also really beloved by Canadians. Again, looking at the carbon footprint, I said that seafood consumption is very small in Canada, and there's been lots of discussions about how do we increase consumption of seafood in Canada. When you take the 1.8% and you double it, you can basically gain about 3 megatons of carbon reductions, which equals about 650,000 cars coming off the road. So again, the carbon potential of just doubling a very small number is very significant. This is all seafood species, but again, when you look at that number from salmon in particular, all these seafood species are included in that calculation. What about our Canadian natural opportunity, our bounty, our biophysical capacity? What these bubbles do is it shows you that, the United States, I'll give you 3 examples. So the US, about 20,000 kilometers of viable shoreline or ocean area for aquaculture. Right now, the US is producing about 10 tons per kilometer. So in terms of intensity of production. Norway, that we just heard from, about 25,000 kilometers, and it's producing about 50 tons, so considerably more intensive. When you look at Canada and its opportunity, we have about 80,000 kilometers of viable coastline. This does not include Arctic, this does not include Great Lakes. And we're producing right now at about 2.1 tons per kilometer. So very, very low production. We are producing at just under 1% of what we could be producing. Comparison with Norway. So you saw the chart of production. Norway has seized this opportunity very clearly. They've had the will, they have the enthusiasm to see this as a great challenge for them, an opportunity. Canada has been very middling. So we started basically in the same place in the 1970s, 60s. They started a little earlier than us. Technology came to Canada. And then we started and we increased up until about 2002, and then since then we've largely flatlined in production for about 20 years. Now there are lots of reasons we can talk about for that, or lots of reasons for that we can talk about, but it's pretty stark, the difference, right? Let's talk about Indigenous participation in this sector. So right now, this is a number from the Assembly of First Nations. Just over 250 Indigenous communities are involved in some way in seafood farming across the country. That's all species. So certainly salmon, trout, we're looking at Arctic char, and other species like shellfish and seaweeds are sort of up and coming, I'd say, but lots of engagement, and I will say a lot of enthusiasm for further engagement. In the BC salmon sector, 20%, 1 in 5 jobs are held by Indigenous people. So again, already a very significant participation. Often you don't hear this information, but the community participation from Indigenous communities is very significant. Chief John Smith, just as an example from the Tlawitsis Nation in British Columbia, said this about the opportunity that he's seeing with his people. So many of these communities are very isolated, coastal communities in British Columbia. They have very few other opportunities. They've seen so many difficulties in their communities. Chief Smith says this about the opportunity he's seeing with his salmon farming. This partnership has opened employment opportunities for our members who will move to Nanaguas, a new community being developed, which means a place to come home to in the Tlawitsis language. So Chief Smith and others are beginning to speak up very clearly about what they see as sustainability in their communities. We're seeing guardian programs on farm sites. We're seeing ownership of major farm sites, and this is salmon farming, but other species as well, shellfish. So there's really a lot of excitement going on in a lot of these communities. In Canada, some of you will know that some decisions have been taken in the last couple of years around BC salmon farms. So previous Minister Jordan made a decision to close down an entire area of salmon farms in British Columbia. Very unfortunate. And I will say one of the difficulties of this is that salmon in Canada is about 80% of the value of the entire aquaculture sector. Once you remove that infrastructure and all of that investment that goes into this highly profitable sector, all these other potential co-benefits and synergies are lost as well. So what the possibility and potential is that using that infrastructure from salmon farming, you can also work with shellfish production. You can work with seaweed development, and there are some experiments going on all across Canada, and the co-benefits are tremendous. So this is something that I think is something we have to look very carefully at in Canada, that potential to expand the aquaculture diversity, but you need that core of salmon, which is where the investment's really happening in Canada. So you take that away, and there's a huge vulnerability there for the rest of the sector. So one of the things we've been doing the last couple of years is working very closely with our wild capture counterparts to develop a seafood vision under the Blue Economy strategy that the Trudeau government has announced. And really our vision is very simple. We want to be a top 3 best sustainable fish and seafood producer in the world. We've lost a lot of ground to other nations, I'd say in the last 20 years. We will never be the top volume producer, but let's be the best in the world. Let's be among the very best sustainable producers in the world. This means for us, these are our proposals, 3 main growth targets. One is to double the value of Canadian seafood. Second is to double the economic benefits to communities, to Indigenous nations. The third is to double domestic consumption of fish and seafood, as we talked about the benefits of doubling or increasing seafood consumption for Canadians. So just to finish my presentation, just 5 key takeaways that I'd leave with you. So it is a human and environmental imperative to grow seafood. We know that we are, again, maximized. There's a demand for high quality sustainable protein in the world, and aquaculture can do this and must do this. Second is it's a key part of the Canadian sustainable food story. So oftentimes in Canada, we sort of divide land from fish and you don't actually bring them together. It's really important that we bring together seafood into that sustainable food story for the future because there are so many benefits to it. Canada has massive biophysical human potential to really capture this opportunity. Fourth is build and improve from a very strong foundation that we have with Atlantic salmon. That is key. It's sort of a touchstone for future development. And the fifth, are there challenges? Absolutely. Jon Arne talked about some of those in the salmon sector, but when have challenges ever been a reason to just stop, right? And I think that what we need to do is we need to continue to work together. We need to identify the challenges and then develop solutions to those. You do that through policy in many ways and process that's clear, that builds confidence in innovation and collaboration. So with that, I'll say thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was, again, just fascinating. And I do want to mention that Tim will be on our discussion panel a little later on. So if you have questions, feel free to get them ready. He's going to be up for that later. I want to say our next presentation is a video describing the EAF Nansen program. EAF stands for Ecosystem Approach to Fisheries, and it means protecting the ocean by using science to make sure that there will be continue to be fish for food over time. So we'll hear greetings from the program's research vessel, the Dr. Fridtjof Nansen. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this meeting to talk about the EAF Nansen program. My name is Merete Tanstad, and I am the coordinator of the program, based at the headquarters of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Rome, Italy, where you find the Program Coordination Unit. The program is funded by the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD, and executed by FAO in close collaboration with the Institute of Marine Research, IMR of Bergen, Norway, and the program partners. The Nansen program is one of the longest running fisheries development support programs in the world. Initiated in 1975 with the aim of studying fishery resources in pooling known oceans, the Nansen program has evolved and adapted in response to challenges and emerging issues for sustainability of marine resources and ecosystems, such as impacts of fishing, impacts of oil, gas activities, or presence of contaminants. Consistently throughout its 4 phases, the program's main focus has been on achieving sustainable fisheries in order to improve food and nutrition security in partner countries with a broad geographic scope. Today, the program works with 32 countries and regional organizations in Africa and the Bay of Bengal. The current phase of the program, that started in 2017, addresses the multiple dimensions of food security by recognizing emergent threats such as impacts of climate change and marine pollution, while focusing on implementing the ecosystem approach to fisheries and developing capacity for sustainable use of the oceans. The program focuses on 3 main areas of work and their interconnections: fisheries management, science and scientific advice, and capacity development. The program is committed to meeting several UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and it was recently endorsed as a key contributor to the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. The ecosystem approach to fisheries addresses ecological, socioeconomic, and governance issues of sustainability. The program works on different levels of fisheries management: global, regional, and national, and even community in some cases. Examples of global work include the development of tools to assess coherence of legislation and policy to EIF requirements, and a tool to monitor EIF implementation. Specific support is also provided to regions and countries to develop, revise, or implement fisheries management plans and setting up appropriate fisheries management cycles. In addition, support is provided to enhance collaboration for shared stocks management. These field projects connect the different elements of fisheries, from data to science, advice, and decisions at national and regional scale. Current field projects take place in the United Republic of Tanzania, the Gulf of Guinea, Northwest Africa, and launching Southwest Africa. A key objective of the program is to support the provision of scientific advice based on available data and information. The research vessel Dr. Fridtjof Nansen is a key tool that allows the program to conduct different types of surveys depending on the partner country's needs. For example, resources surveys for monitoring, ecosystem surveys, or habitat surveys as example. The current vessel, the third Dr. Fridtjof Nansen, is one of the most advanced marine research vessels in the world. As its predecessors, it exclusively serves the program and its partners, offering modern facilities and scientific equipment. The science plan was introduced in 2017 from the start of the current phase. It guides the research work of the program and the sampling on board the Dr. Fridtjof Nansen. 11 research themes have been identified relating to 3 pillars: fisheries impacts, pollution impacts, and climate change. It is also a vehicle for the further development of the capacity for research or partners for planning, conducting and reporting on high-quality research. In the context of the science plan, scientists from the partner countries are working in collaboration with international experts and experts from IMR with the aim to provide scientific manuscripts and reports. Working in partnership with regional organizations responsible for fisheries, the program also works to strengthen national and regional processes for scientific advice on state of stocks and fisheries and vulnerable habitats, supporting the work of the working groups of partner regional bodies in Africa. The capacity development activities of the program aims to build capacity of partners for fisheries management and related research. The technical training network serves to provide more formalized training to partners. Examples include the ecosystem approach to fisheries, shared stock management, how to be a cruise leader, taxonomy, and in various tools and methods for assessment. Several courses are offered every year related to the thematic areas shown on this slide. New to the program is the studentship program, whereby 11 young scientists have been selected to receive support for their master's or PhD work while working on the program's science plan. In the past 46 years, the Nansen program has put together thousands of scientists from more than 60 countries worldwide, joining different backgrounds and cultures. One key contributor to success has been focusing on management questions while producing relevant science with a strong focus on capacity development. Having access to a research vessel makes the program unique, and life on board creates a unique mechanism and sense of community, reinforcing international exchanges, but also facilitating cooperation that often goes beyond the survey. The program is also a great vehicle for forging partnerships and collaboration between countries and region due to its broad geographic scope. So now over to Katrine. She is the survey coordinator of the program and the cruise leader of the ongoing survey in Cape Verde. Thank you all for listening.
Greetings to all of you from the research vessel Dr. Fridtjof Nansen. My name is Katrine Michaelsen. I'm a senior scientist at the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, and I will be the cruise leader for this marine expeditions around Cape Verde Islands that will take place from the 19th of November to the 15th of December.
Hello everyone, my name is Vitor Ramos. I am the coordinator of the Oceanography Department at the Sea Institute in Cabo Verde. As a local co-cruise leader, I will be supporting Catherine in supervising the team's work in data collection, analysis and reporting processes.
At the moment, we are in Las Palmas, from where our expedition will soon start. We will, in a moment or two, we are ready to head south towards the Cape Verde Islands. In addition to the crew, which consists of 15 seamen, the expedition includes 16 local scientists from Cape Verde, 8 participants from Norway, and 2 guest scientists, one from Spain and one from the Ivory Coast. The main objective of this survey is to collect data on the abundance of plankton, demersal fish, pelagic fish, and also map the presence of microplastic and marine debris. We will also take samples of fish to record the amount of nutrients and contaminant in the various commercial fish species. We will conduct all this sampling because good management of fisheries, and thus also blue growth, depend on good knowledge of the fish stocks, what they eat and which environment they are facing.
In addition to the sampling, the scientists on board the vessel will receive training in data collection, sampling procedures and species identification as part of the capacity building effort, which is a core objective of the EAF Nansen program.
All this activity is possible thanks to the advanced technology and modern equipment available on this fantastic vessel, Dr. Fridtjof Nansen. And as a curiosity, this is the only vessel that are sailing under the UN flag. With this vessel and through the Nansen program, we can study some of the least observed waters in the world. You can follow updates from us on the Facebook site Cruising with Dr. Fridtjof Nansen, and you can get more information about the EAF Nansen program if you go to the FAO website. Thank you
and best
wishes from us all. Good luck with your conference in Canada.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating again. At this moment, we're going to move into the part of our program that will be eventually a discussion. But first, we're going to invite one more guest from away. And so I wonder if I could invite Ms. McDonald and Mr. Kennedy back to the front to sit in these chairs while, so where we're going to have our discussion. And while they make their way here, I'm going to introduce our final guest, who will also take part in the discussion later on. Jan Gunnar Winter, who is director of the Center for the Ocean and the Arctic at the Norwegian Institute of Food, Fisheries and Aquaculture Research, and he is also a specialist director of the Norwegian Polar Institute. He is an accomplished research scientist. He was lead author on the 5th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and he is joining our discussion virtually. He'll start off by saying a few remarks, and then he'll join us in the discussion on stage.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Distinguished guest ambassador. It's a pleasure to be with you, although it's on distance. I am a polar scientist. As trained as a polar scientist, I spent several years of my career in a tent in polar regions. So that's my background. And then gradually I became a manager and also served on a number of international bodies. So that's enough about me, I think, for the time being. I will make 4 points. And also having the background as a climate scientist, I would like to stress what also Sture Henriksen argued in the beginning, that climate change has to be the center of all our discussions, all our decisions. We as climate scientists have been running behind the development and the pace of climate change, especially in the polar regions, for years. We are taken by surprise over and over again. My hometown, Tromsø, which has an Atlantic climate, if you should believe the climate model projections, and that's the thing we need to believe in, the climate of today in Tromsø will actually be in the high Arctic, in Svalbard, at the end of this century. These are the kind of fundamental, dramatic changes we will see, and they will come to some extent, regardless of if we are able to reach the 1.5 degree Celsius goal or not. So fundamental changes, and I worry from time to time that our society, private sector, and also governments are not taking decisions today that actually captures the most likely future. So climate change as a key driver, but also a fundamental centerpiece in also blue economy. The second point I wanted to make was that I think we can use the Arctic as a role model for sustainable development. We hear voices, maybe mostly outside the Arctic, that argue that we should have low or even no activities in certain areas in the Arctic. Northerners like Norway and Canadians, they would argue that there is important with value creation to sustain and develop societies which are attractive. So how do we combine and reconcile these two different views? Well, I think one way of addressing that and meeting that is to develop the highest standards possible when it comes to greening activity, having the sustainable bar as high as we can. And we can then develop tomorrow's solutions, and also under a title that could be what works in the Arctic works everywhere. So it could be good for a region, but it could also be exported to other areas of the world. My third point is about the need for taking an integrated, holistic approach, and I am now in particular thinking of management. Integrated, ecosystem-based, science-based ocean management. I also worked in the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, and there is a clear message from that work that we have to look at future sustainable ocean management in a holistic way. And the instrument that we know as the integrated ocean management offers such an approach. And then lastly, also a key message from the high-level panel was that while integrated ocean management is context sensitive, so one size does not fit everywhere, there is also universal features for successful implementation. And one of these are effective adaptation to climate change. So I would, in this perspective, argue that the Arctic could provide lessons for climate change adaptation in integrated ocean management. Management that needs to be much more dynamic and adaptive in future than it has been up till now. And we need to be climate smart. So succeeding in climate change adaptation in the Arctic could help inspire sustainable development in other parts of the world. And I think that underestimating the rapid changes in ocean temperatures, biodiversity, and chemistry could have serious consequences, and so could missing the opportunity to learn from the Arctic experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for staying to be part of our discussion as well. I appreciate that, and thank you both for being here again. You know, one of the things that, so we have a few minutes for discussion, and then there'll be questions as well. One of the things that I am really fascinated in is just how this conversation about ocean business has changed over time. You've both talked about it, and we've all talked about it here this morning, but how do we track that arc? I mean, it used to be ocean business was let's make sure there are jobs. And now all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of other factors. We have not just sustainability, we have inclusivity, but if we think about, if we can focus for a moment on climate, because that is the pressing issue of our era, when did that start to become part of the conversation? Maybe Kendra, you could start, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I can comment from a supercluster perspective. I think when the supercluster was first launched and the programming areas, they were focused on digital. So I think there was a recognition that digital solutions would have, impacts from, were considered also sustainable solutions. But there was, my understanding, this a bit predates me, but my understanding is there was actually very careful not to bring the sustainable language into the initial thinking around the supercluster. And I remember when we were developing our first brand video, so you saw our second brand video, we actually really debated as to whether or not we talked about ocean health in that video. So the journey that Canada had taken, we had an ocean protection plan, and we had an ocean supercluster, and there was a bit of a feel that, if you wanted to protect the ocean, you went over to the ocean protection plan, and if you were going to take advantage of the ocean, you were part of the supercluster, which wasn't great branding for us in terms of messaging. And I remember the first time I went to Norway, it was in mid-2019, and they had a much more integrated story around sustainable development of the blue economy. And I said, our brand needs to be that. We need to, I got to participate actually here. I was part of the high-level panel on sustainability discussion, and that was much more integrated around protection, prosperity, and production. And I just thought that messaging made a lot more sense. And then very quickly, I think during the pandemic, we've seen the climate change conversation accelerate, and it's just a very natural to talk about them both together. But it wasn't, it's hard to believe, it was only 3 years ago. They were much more separate.
And so you think it was the pandemic that made the difference?
I mean, who knows if the pandemic drove it. I think there were lots of images during the pandemic around a healthier planet as we kept people in houses and less fog. And so I think that was part of it. I think the conversation was accelerating anyway with some of the big demonstrations of young people all around the world talking about climate action. I think there were just a number of things that happened at the same time, as well as an increase in awareness with some of the reports around the cryosphere, and the high-level panel on sustainability was raising the awareness of the ocean's role as part of the climate change conversation. So I think it wasn't just the pandemic, there was a bunch of things that all sort of were happening at the same time. And then the pressure on the fossil fuels and some of the things that we've seen in that industry around the climate change conversation. So, yeah.
What about you, Tim? I mean, in terms
Yeah,
of
no, I'd like to comment on that, because I think it's really important to remember that the commercial, as an example, the commercial salmon sector has only been around for about 45, 50 years. So it's actually a very young food production sector. What's interesting about that is that it's constantly been changing. Because it's young, because it's been part of sort of an innovation environment, and because it's so close and intimate to nature, right? It's in the water, it's a food product. I think there's been an incredible responsiveness to trying to figure out environmental issues. There's sensitivity to very, very immediate to sort of seeing response from warming oceans, cooling oceans, right? The extremes of temperature, especially on the east coast of Canada, for instance. So I think there's been a real attentiveness to that. But we've also seen drivers like feed going into the process. How efficient can that feed be? How can we reduce impact? And then climate has very much sort of been part of that mix in the last 10 years. So I think the aquaculture sector generally has been very sensitive and attentive to this issue, and climate has just become a major focus.
So you're saying that there hasn't been a recent trigger?
I don't think so much. It's been part of the sort of evolution of the sector in a very, I think, a very strongly responsive perspective within the sector.
And I'm wondering, Jan Gunnar, if you could talk about how that works at an international level. When has the conversation really changed about marine business and sustainability? It feels like it has, but I'm wondering if you could track that.
It has, absolutely. I would maybe draw a political timeline and an academic scientific timeline when it comes to impact in the climate change discussion. IPCC released its first assessment report in 1990. Already some evidence that we had a human-made anthropogenic climate change, a new report in 95 and a third one in 2001. So that's the academic scientific timeline. It starts, you could say, in 1990. So around 20 years after 1990, we have the failure of the Copenhagen, and now I'm on the political timeline. We had a success in Paris in 2015, and we had another success in Glasgow, you could say, this year. So it's about 20 years delay here, and I believe in the theory that the last speaker also had, that this is evolving. It's evolution. It takes time, and it's been more and more intense. And I would say that the private sector and business, they have been lagging behind science, which is natural, but they may have been a few years up front of the political awareness of climate change, which is interesting. So private sector has been driving some of the international conversation for the last 5 years, I would say. But this is not a linear development. It's been accelerating quite a lot, and nobody now can speak about anything without taking climate change into account. And when it comes to the ocean in particular, I think it's quite a few years since we really saw that getting to the top of the international agenda. I don't think you have to go further back than 5 years, where it was not a political heated topic, maybe not as much in the private sector either. And then suddenly it shows up in G7 meeting, G20, UN, World Economic Forum. So it has gained mass and momentum very recently and very quickly.
And so my question is why? What has happened?
Well, I think science has proven that this is a critical issue to address. And the whole narrative now that the oceans are not only a victim of climate change and pollution and biodiversity loss, it's also part of the solution. I think that has been unfolded, and more people have seen that the oceans, can't take it for granted. It's not too big to fail, so we have to keep it in good health, but it's actually so big and has so many services to mankind that if you use it smart and sustainable, it can provide services that we need: food, energy, transportation, and a healthy planet where we get our oxygen and our recreation and so on.
I think maybe just another comment that, with social media and the number of natural disasters and changes in weather patterns and what's happening in British Columbia and the fires in Australia, I think that has also, we've had a number of those, and that has really shone a spotlight in terms of the speed with which some of the climate is changing, and the tracking of the Arctic, like just that whole conversation globally with social media sort of feeding that has also helped.
I'm fascinated with the arc of that you were talking about, the political, the political markers that we've had at the different COP meetings. But I mean, I remember back when talking about a 6% reduction in emissions was a really big deal, and that's not that long ago. We have had the science to show us that this was necessary, but all of a sudden now we're talking about 80, 90, 100%. And I'm wondering if some of that political momentum is sort of feeding through into thinking, because really what you're talking about is a cultural change in how we understand the marine business, I think, is what you're talking about. Do you think that there is that political feeding through?
Well, I mean, it's become much more of a mainstream conversation. And even when I look at blue economy, like 2 years ago, when I was invited to speak, it was generally at blue economy conferences. This year, it's been the Conference Board of Canada and the Institute of Corporate Directors and the Chamber of Commerce. And so there just is much more awareness, and it is becoming a much more mainstream conversation. And the more mainstream it is, the more that sort of influences the political conversation. And so we've got a loop that is now feeding off itself, and we're no longer disputing the science, which I think, when Al Gore was talking about climate, we were still in a big debate over, or part of the narrative was whether or not it was real. I think we've, for the most part, moved past that.
We've moved on.
Yeah.
We can see it in our backyards, right? We can see it everywhere we go.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Does anybody from the audience have a question for any of our three people on the panel? Just checking in with you to see if we have a mic, and could you please speak into the mic? Does anybody have a question at this point? Not so far. Okay. Well, signal if you do end up with one. I'm really fascinated too with the idea, and again, Jan Gunnar, if maybe you could start off with this, is this concept that we've been hearing about. Kendra, you talked about it, about the ocean what is the risk, and when will it happen, that the ocean will stop absorbing as much carbon as it is now? Because it's what about, is it 30% or so of the global carbon emissions get absorbed? And we're not talking about heat here, we're just talking about carbon itself. When will that change?
Well, it's changing all the time, but it's very gradual. So we know, and this is physics, that cold water can absorb more CO2 than warmer water. So when we are heating up both the atmosphere and the ocean, it will gradually have a less capacity to absorb more CO2. And then it's what we often call the second CO2 problem. So CO2 is a greenhouse gas which gives a warmer planet, but we also have the CO2 gas which is absorbed in water that will make the water more acid. That's also a very, very slow process, although it's now much more rapid than it has been for millions of years. But it will eventually be a threat to some of the life in the ocean, for example, coral reefs and mussels, and also some shellfish. So there are very few, let's say, tipping points, but there are tipping points too in the climate, and these are, of course, very low probability, but high effects and consequences incidents. And we have frozen continental shelves from the last ice age that are in the marine environment that could maybe, if there was landslides, subsea landslides, it would then release suddenly a lot of methane. The methane that we lose from melting or thawing permafrost on land is also a slow process. It adds some of the greenhouse gas to the atmosphere, but it goes slowly. In the ocean, it can happen quicker. We can have changes in the Greenland ice sheet, which could be a sudden release of water, increasing the sea level. But we could also have effects of regional cooling due to tipping points, and one of them is connected to interruption or slowing down on the North Atlantic current, which we often call the Gulf Stream. So we have some uncertainty in the system, and I think there are every reason to keep the global average temperature as low as possible to avoid that we get this very inconvenient surprises in the future.
So how does the Southern Ocean fit into that picture? Because my understanding is that it may actually be already releasing ancient carbon from the cold depths. Is that, and I wonder if that's considered another tipping point, or whether that's even in the literature at this moment. Do you know? Do you happen to know about what's happening in the Southern Ocean with release of carbon? No? I think we've lost our feed. No,
did you ask me?
I did. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I apologize.
No, this is not my field of expertise. But the oceans have, as you said, absorbed CO2 around 25 to 30% of the emissions. So then it's acting as a buffer, helping us out, so we avoid everything going to the atmosphere. Right. And then it loses its capacity for capturing more CO2 as we warm up the water. So it's a buffer and very convenient one, but it's losing some of its power over time.
Right. Okay.
My understanding is like yours, that the Southern Ocean is actually becoming a carbon emitter as opposed to a carbon absorber.
There's all this ancient carbon, as I understand it, that is being churned up by the increasing circulation around around Antarctica. And so the question is then, what happens to all of these industries that you're planning? All of the, you're talking about increasing by billions of dollars, by factors, all of these ways in which humans are making use of the ocean. How does that? Do you plan for this stuff? How do you?
I mean, I'll just use a number of examples from aquaculture. So I think in Canada, we're looking much more closely at seaweed development. So seaweed as a carbon sink. It's a great opportunity. I think Canadians don't eat a lot of seaweed. It's not part of our culture so much, but it can be used in animal feeds. There have been certain seaweed types that have been shown to reduce emissions, methane emissions from cattle, for instance, by 90%. Right. So actually getting some of these solutions into the larger food system is a really exciting opportunity. But I think, innovation and adaptation, that's exactly what we're doing. I know that, Kendra, you're really focused on that with industry. But just looking at solutions when we have larger algal blooms on the west coast of Canada, how do you deal with that? That's partly a technology issue. Right. It's partly an adaptation to the net systems or the farm sites, and all of that is going on right now.
So Kendra, do you factor some of this in your thinking, in your discussions with these innovators? Is it too early for that? Or?
So I mean, all of our projects would, our digital solutions, our sustainable solutions, they're having some kind of positive impact as well as creating commercial opportunity. I can't think of any projects in our portfolio that would not be touching on both. Some of them would certainly have a broader emission, like I mentioned. Some have very specific emission reductions targets. Some of them just by getting people out of the ocean, or putting smaller vessels, or if you're using a small uncrewed surface vessel versus a large research vessel, that has a very different impact. At a higher level, though, I think Canada's work on the blue economy strategy, as Canada thinks about sustainable blue economic development at a broader Canadian level, that'll be an important part of that balance, is how does our economic growth ambition match with our protection ambitions as a country, which is beyond the supercluster itself.
It fascinates me that here we are talking about building up marine industries, which is what, and yet we're really talking about the health of the ocean. I mean, I think Kendra, I remember you talking about this at one point. You said there is no way forward in the marine sphere that is not sustainable. It has to be part of it. And I find it fascinating that this is. I understand, Jan Gunnar, from a scientist point of view, that this is something that you've been talking. Your sector has been talking about for a long time. But I mean, the fact that it's filtered down to, they used to be thought of as not as two sides of a coin, but as enemies. In fact, we use the word exploitation of the sea. We don't even use production often, and somehow that has shifted to the point that you guys are here on stage with a climate scientist or a polar scientist talking about the health of the ocean and how this is the critical thing for the future.
Part of the challenge is it's actually an all-planet conversation, and that's where it gets really complicated. So if you're having an aquaculture conversation without talking about it in the context of the footprint of agriculture as a source of protein versus aquaculture, I was at a conference, I think it was in Norway, where the students stood up from a group and said, the one thing we're sure is we are against seabed mining. And then the guy that represented, I can't remember what organization it was, he said, well, so that's interesting, except we need these rare minerals, and you're not going to give up your phones, and we're not, we need it for batteries. And so does that mean that you are a supporter of mining on land, right? Because mining on land, in fact, I could demonstrate to you, I could do it more sustainably in the ocean than we're currently doing it on land. So let's have that conversation. And so there's several examples like that. And so we have the ocean conversation, we have the land conversation. I think when we're talking about climate and the whole net zero agenda, they have to come together. It is truly an all-planet conversation to get where we need to go.
And one of the things that I really appreciate in the supercluster approach, I don't know how effective it is, but is the ocean supercluster based on the East Coast, protein supercluster in the prairies, and a number of other clusters. They come together, they talk about cross-cutting issues. That has to happen, right? Because the silos that we're under so often in sort of government policy can be really, I think, destructive to those sustainability discussions.
Yeah, I wonder if I could ask you, Jan Gunnar, to have the final word on I find it remarkable that here we are in a business, marine business forum talking about the health of the ocean. I find that to be inspiring.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a new normal. A former prime minister of Norway said everything is connected to everything. And that is what's said here. Things are complicated and they are connected. So any conversation about planetary boundaries or oceans or management needs to take into account that we have a lot of things that we have to evaluate and consider at the same time. And that's where this integrated ocean management comes in so nicely, because it just has as a principle that we need to find a good balance between protection and production, and realizes that if we don't have a good health in our environment, we cannot harvest from it either. And then there is another balance point in that thinking, and that is that you must see all the or human activities in combination. So from a nation's point of view, you would like to optimize the total outcome and value creation from all sectors, it be aquaculture or shipping or oil and gas or tourism. And that's also a balancing act. And in many places in the world, there is not a good integration of the whole system when nations do management. And that's also why the high-level panel for sustainable ocean for a sustainable ocean economy as this key recommendation is that we need to have a sustainable ocean management and sustainable ocean plans, which takes this integrated approach. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for our guests from the audience? No.
People are rusty, I think.
People are
After
rusty.
being home for so long.
How do you talk to a Zoom screen? Well, in that case, I will simply. We have one. Well done,
Since nobody else would like to. First of all, thanks very much for the presentation. My question has to do with fishery subsidies. I know that the new head of the World Trade Organization has signaled that she's making phasing out fishery subsidies a priority. And so I'm wondering, with this talk of, for example, in Canada, doubling our seafood consumption, how can we do this with policies that don't, at the same time, I guess, give license to other countries to continue fishery subsidies in regions that might have more ecologically strained ocean environments?
Wow, I guess that's to
I
me.
think
But
that's
that's
you.
a great question. I will let me preface it by saying I'm not an expert in wild capture fisheries policy, so forgive me. Someone will call me, I'm sure, after my comments. But I would just say, look, big discussion on traceability that I think is very rich and very positive and timely. I would say it's a huge, actually, advantage that the aquaculture sector has right now, that traceability is relatively simple, very integrated operations, and we can trace from egg to plate very, very simply in most situations. Much more difficult on the wild capture side. But I do think the government of Canada is making some strides in improving that understanding, and certainly at the global level, there's a lot of discussions about tracing where is supply coming from, and as we improve that, I think that will improve the situation overall. So I'm pretty excited by that. Again, Canadian producers on the wild capture and aquaculture side, very strong traceability, lots of certification, ASC, MSC, other certification standards. It's really seafood that is produced in the rest of the world, right? So this is an international dialogue issue. And again, I know Norway, some of the other leading seafood nations are very much part of that. So I'm encouraged. It's not an answer right away, but I would say I'm encouraged by some of the progress being made in the international discussions on this issue.
Thank you. We have time for one more quickish question, if anybody has one. Anybody? No? In that case, may I just thank you, all three of you brilliant panelists, for being here and taking part in this discussion. Really fascinating. And I'd like to invite Ambassador Fredrickson to come back to the stage, and I think we can leave.
So thank you, Alana. I will be very quick because in a very short moment there will be such a thing as a free lunch for all of you upstairs. So we're looking forward to see you upstairs. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank our partner who have been working with us, Royal Canadian Geographic Society, and our wonderful moderator, who's been with us for not only today's seminar on the oceans, but also yesterday's session on the Arctic. So first of all, Sarah Legault, can I ask you to come up? Because without you, none of this would have happened. You've been with us all the way, coached us through this sort of feeling of starting over again with events. So thank you so much. And inside that gift, there are some sustainable Norwegian wool products. So yeah. And Alana, if I can thank you for guiding us through both days in a very professional and nice manner. So here you go, sustainable wool for you as well. Welcome. And the last one was supposed to go to John Geiger, who are his staff meeting. Well, he'll get it later. So anyway, thank you for co-hosting this with us, and thank you all for coming, and see you upstairs to enjoy good conversations over lunch.